The rain hammered against the recruitment center's windows with the persistence of machine gun fire, each drop a reminder of the storm that had been Maya Chen's life for the past 3 years. She sat in the sterile waiting room, her oversized hoodie pulled tight around her small frame, dark hair falling like a curtain across half her face. The other recruits, mostly young men with buzzed haircuts and confident postures, cast sideways glances at her, their whispers cutting through the fluorescent-lit silence. "What's she even doing here?" one of them muttered, not bothering to lower his voice. "Looks like she weighs about 90 pounds soaking wet." "Probably here for the admin jobs," another added with a snicker. "Filing papers and making coffee." Maya's fingers unconsciously traced the edge of her sleeve, feeling the raised lines of ink beneath the fabric. 3 years ago, she had been a different person, entirely valedictorian of her high school class, full scholarship to Stanford, a future mapped out in neat, achievable milestones. That was before the accident that killed her parents, before the spiral into grief and self-destruction that cost her everything she had worked for. Before she learned that sometimes you have to tear down everything you think you are to discover who you're meant to become. The tattoo on her forearm told that story in stark, unflinching detail. Most people saw only the surface, the bold script inked in midnight black, the geometric patterns that seemed to shift and move in certain light. They saw rebellion, they saw someone trying too hard to be different, they saw weakness masquerading as strength. They never saw the truth hidden in plain sight. Commander Nathan Cross emerged from the inner office, his presence immediately commanding the attention of every person in the room. 6 feet 3 inches of weathered determination, he moved with the fluid precision of someone who had spent 23 years turning impossible missions into completed objectives. His steel-gray eyes swept across the assembled recruits, cataloging strengths and weaknesses with the efficiency of a tactical computer. "Chen, Maya," he called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. Maya stood slowly, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. The whispers started again, louder this time. "This should be good. $5 says she doesn't last 10 minutes. Wonder what sob story she's going to try." Commander Cross held the door open as she approached, his expression unreadable. She had expected judgment, maybe even dismissal, but what she found in his eyes was something far more unsettling: professional curiosity. The office was spartanly furnished, its walls lined with commendations and photographs of men and women who had earned their place in elite military units through blood, sweat, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Behind Cross's desk hung a simple wooden plaque bearing the SEAL motto: "The only easy day was yesterday." "Have a seat," Cross said, settling behind his desk with practiced ease. He opened a manila folder, scanning the contents with the same methodical attention he might give to mission briefings. Maya Chen. 21 years old. No military experience. No competitive athletics. No obvious qualifications for special operations training. He looked up, those gray eyes boring into hers. "So tell me, Miss Chen, what exactly are you doing in my office?" Maya had practiced this moment 1,000 times in front of her mirror, had rehearsed the words until they felt like armor against the inevitable skepticism. But, sitting here, under the penetrating gaze of a man who had probably forgotten more about warfare than most people would ever learn, her prepared speech crumbled into dust. "Because I have nothing left to lose," she said simply. Cross leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed interest. "Explain." The words came haltingly at first, then, in a rush that surprised even her. She told him about her parents, her father, a marine biologist whose gentle hands had taught her to see wonder in the smallest creatures, her mother, a high school English teacher who had shown her that words could be weapons or healing balm, depending on the wielder's intent. She spoke of the drunk driver who had stolen them both in a heartbeat, leaving her alone at 18 with nothing but survivor's guilt and a college fund that felt like blood money. "I tried to be what they wanted me to be," Maya continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Perfect student, perfect daughter, perfect future doctor or lawyer or whatever would make their sacrifice worthwhile. But perfect is just another word for fragile. When the pressure got too intense, when the grief got too heavy, I shattered." She had dropped out of Stanford halfway through her sophomore year, had burned through her inheritance in a haze of bad decisions and worse company. Rock bottom had been a jail cell in downtown San Francisco, arrested for public intoxication and disturbing the peace after a fight outside a tattoo parlor that she couldn't even properly remember. "That's when I got this," Maya said, pushing up her sleeve with deliberate slowness. Commander Cross's eyes widened slightly, the first crack in his professional composure. The tattoo that wrapped around her forearm was unlike anything he had ever seen. At first glance, it appeared to be an intricate mandala, geometric patterns flowing into organic shapes with mathematical precision. But, as his eyes adjusted, the image seemed to shift and reveal hidden layers of meaning. Embedded within the design were symbols from a dozen different military units, not copied or appropriated, but woven into the larger pattern with such skill that they seemed to belong there naturally. The trident of the Navy SEALs curved along her wrist, its points forming the center of a compass rose. The crossed arrows of Special Forces emerged from flowing water that transformed into the eagle of the Marine Corps. The dagger of the Rangers pointed toward text that spiraled around her arm and languages Cross recognized from deployments in Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, and places that didn't officially exist on any map. But it was the words themselves that stopped his breath entirely. Not because they were foreign or mysterious, but because they were achingly familiar. Quotes from military philosophy, fragments of warrior poetry, phrases he had spoken to his own men in moments of crisis and triumph. The kind of knowledge that wasn't learned from books or movies, but earned through experience and blood. "How?" Cross asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya's smile was sad and knowing. "My cellmate was a Marine veteran. 3 tours in Afghanistan, Purple Heart recipient, kicked out for PTSD and drug problems. She saw me crying over my pretty little problems and told me something I'll never forget. Little girl, you think you're broken, but broken is just the first step to becoming unbreakable." The veteran's name was Sarah Martinez, though she insisted everyone call her Gunny. She had spent 36 hours in that cell sharing stories that no civilian should ever have to hear, tales of brotherhood forged in fire, of men and women who had found strength they never knew they possessed when everything else was stripped away. "She told me that the military doesn't make you strong," Maya continued. "It just puts you in situations where you discover the strength that was already there. She said the best warriors aren't the ones who never fall down, they're the ones who get back up every single time." Under Gunny's guidance, Maya had spent 18 months transforming herself from the inside out. The tattoo had been the culmination of that process, each symbol earned through months of study, each quote memorized through repetition and reflection. But, more than that, it had become a roadmap for the person she was determined to become. Cross found himself leaning forward, his attention completely captured. In his years of military service, he had learned to read people with the accuracy of a polygraph machine. He could spot weakness, fear, and deception from across a room. But what he saw in Mayachin defied every category he had developed for potential recruits. "The other kids out there," he said slowly, "they look at you and see someone who doesn't belong. What do you see when you look at them?" "I see people who haven't been tested yet," Maya replied without hesitation. "They've got physical strength, natural talent, maybe even courage. But they don't know what they're really made of because they've never had everything taken away. When that happens, and it will happen, some of them will break. Some of them will quit. And some of them will discover that they're stronger than they ever imagined." "And which one are you?" Maya's smile was sharp as a blade. "I'm the one who already broke and came back together stronger. I'm the one who has nothing left to prove to anyone except myself." Commander Cross had interviewed thousands of potential recruits over the course of his career. He had seen every type of motivation, every kind of background, every variation of human determination. But he had never encountered someone who wore their transformation so literally on their skin, who had turned their scars into art and their weakness into weapons. "The training will be harder than anything you've ever experienced," he warned her. 90% of the people who start don't finish. The instructors will do everything in their power to make you quit. They'll attack your weaknesses, exploit your fears, and push you past every limit you thought you had." "Good," Maya said simply. "I'm counting on it." Cross studied the tattoo again, his eyes tracing the intricate patterns that seemed to tell a story of death and rebirth, of weakness transformed into strength through sheer force of will. Hidden within the larger design, he now noticed smaller details that spoke to an obsessive attention to accuracy, the correct number of stars on various unit insignias, the proper orientation of crossed rifles, the exact shade of blue that distinguished Navy from Air Force symbols. This took months to complete, he observed.
14 months, Maya confirmed.
2 hours every Tuesday and Thursday at a shop in Oakland. The artist was another veteran Army Special Forces.
He said it was the most complex piece he'd ever attempted. And the research? Everything. Field manuals, unit histories, interviews with active and retired personnel.
I wanted to make sure I understood not just what the symbols meant, but what they cost the people who earned the right to wear them. Cross nodded slowly, a new respect evident in his expression. Most people get military tattoos as a fashion statement or to look tough. You treated it like a doctoral thesis.
Because it was, Maya said.
It was my education in what it really means to serve. Gunny told me that civilians think military service is about fighting the enemy, but it's really about fighting yourself.
Every day, you choose between the person you were and the person you could become. The tattoo reminds me of that choice.
The rain had stopped while they talked, and late afternoon sunlight streamed through the office windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Cross realized that his standard 20-minute interview had stretched to nearly 2 hours, but he felt no inclination to cut it short.
For the first time in months, he was genuinely intrigued by a potential recruit.
There's something else, Maya said, rolling up her other sleeve to reveal a second tattoo, smaller and simpler, but somehow more powerful in its stark honesty. It was a single line of text in flowing script: "The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others."
Cross recognized the quote immediately.
It was from a letter written by a Marine lieutenant to his family before his final deployment, words that had become legendary within certain circles of the special operations community. But seeing it here, on the arm of a young woman who had clearly lived its meaning rather than simply admiring its poetry, sent a chill down his spine.
Marcus Aurelius, he said quietly. Meditations.
Though most people know it from Lieutenant Colonel Rivera's adaptation.
Maya nodded. Gunny gave me his original letter.
Said I'd earned the right to carry his words. She met Cross's gaze directly, her dark eyes reflecting a depth of understanding that seemed impossible for someone her age.
I know what you're thinking. I know how this looks. Small Asian girl with pretty tattoos thinking she can play soldier. But I didn't come here to play, Commander. I came here to transform.
Cross leaned back in his chair, his mind racing through the implications of what he had just heard. Military tattoos were common enough, but what Maya wore was something entirely different: a comprehensive study of warrior culture made flesh, a commitment to understanding that went far beyond surface-level appreciation. More than that, she had demonstrated the kind of intellectual rigor and attention to detail that separated elite operators from conventional soldiers.
You understand what you're asking for, he said finally. Special operations training isn't just physically demanding, it's designed to break down everything you think you know about yourself and rebuild you from the ground up.
Most people who attempt it discover limits they never knew they had.
I've already been broken down, Maya replied. The question is whether you're willing to help me rebuild.
The challenge in her voice was subtle but unmistakable. She wasn't begging for an opportunity, she was offering one. For a commander who had spent years watching promising recruits flame out under pressure, the distinction was profound. Cross glanced at the clock on his wall, realizing that the waiting room was probably full of increasingly restless young men who had expected their turn hours ago. But none of them had walked into his office carrying the physical evidence of a personal transformation, none of them had demonstrated the kind of intellectual curiosity that turned good soldiers into great operators.
The basic requirements are non-negotiable, he said.
Physical fitness standards, psychological evaluations, security clearances.
Can you meet them?
Already have, Maya said, producing a folder from her backpack.
Medical records, fitness test scores, background investigation results. I've been preparing for this conversation for 18 months.
Cross flipped through the documents, his eyebrows rising incrementally with each page. Her fitness scores weren't just passing, they were competitive with male recruits 15 pounds heavier and 5 years younger. Her psychological evaluation read like a textbook case study in resilience and adaptation. Her background investigation had turned up the arrest from her darker days but also revealed the systematic way she had rebuilt her life afterward.
Impressive, he admitted. But paper qualifications only get you in the door. The real test starts when everything you think you know about yourself gets stripped away. Maya's smile was confident without being cocky. Commander, I spent 2 years destroying everything I thought I was. I've already done the hardest part. Now I just need someone to show me what I can become.
The conviction in her voice carried the weight of lived experience, not theoretical knowledge. Cross had heard similar words from hundreds of recruits over the years, but, coming from Maya, they felt different. She wasn't speaking from inspiration or imagination, she was speaking from the perspective of someone who had already walked through the fire and emerged transformed. There's one more thing, Cross said, studying her face for any sign of hesitation.
If I recommend you for the program, you'll be under more scrutiny than any other recruit. The instructors will be waiting for you to prove them right about women in special operations. Your fellow trainees will be looking for signs of weakness. Every mistake will be magnified, every success will be questioned. Let them look, Maya said simply. I didn't come this far to be invisible.
Commander Cross closed her file and leaned back in his chair, his decision crystallizing with the clarity that had guided him through 2 decades of life or death choices. He had interviewed thousands of potential operators, had developed an instinct for separating the genuinely exceptional from the merely determined. Maya Chen represented something he had rarely encountered: a recruit who had already completed the most difficult part of special operations training before ever setting foot in a military facility. Report to Camp Pendleton on Monday morning, he said.
0500 hours. Building 1405. Ask for Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez. Maya's composure finally cracked, revealing a moment of pure joy that transformed her entire face. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Cross warned. Thank me when you graduate. If you graduate.
As Maya gathered her papers and prepared to leave, Cross found himself studying the visible portions of her tattoos one last time. What had initially seemed like elaborate decoration now revealed itself as something far more profound: a visual manifesto of transformation, a permanent reminder that strength could be forged from the raw material of weakness. One last question, he called out as she reached the door. Why special operations? Why not regular military service? Maya paused, her hand on the doorknob. Because I've already proven I can survive anything life throws at me. Now I want to prove I can do it while carrying someone else through the same fire. After she left, Cross sat alone in his office for a long time, staring at the rain-streaked windows and thinking about the nature of strength. In his experience, the most dangerous operators weren't the ones who had never known defeat, they were the ones who had been broken completely and chosen to rebuild themselves into something harder and more resilient than before. Maya Chen's tattoos told the story of exactly that kind of transformation, written in ink and determination across skin that had learned to bear weight it never should have carried. Whether she could translate that personal victory into operational effectiveness remained to be seen, but Cross had a feeling that the young woman who had just left his office was going to surprise a lot of people. The waiting room still held a dozen other recruits, all of them eager for their chance to prove themselves worthy of elite military training. But, as Cross prepared to call the next name, he found himself thinking about the difference between wanting to be strong and having already proven it under the worst possible circumstances. Most of the young men outside had never been truly tested. They had natural ability, physical gifts, and the kind of confidence that came from success in controlled environments. But Maya Chen had something infinitely more valuable. She had already discovered what she was made of when everything else was stripped away. That knowledge, Cross knew, was the foundation upon which truly exceptional operators were built. Part 2, The Crucible of Truth. The pre-dawn darkness of Camp Pendleton felt like a living thing, thick with marine fog and the weight of decades of military tradition. Maya arrived at Building 1405 45 minutes early, her single duffel bag slung over her shoulder and her mind carefully blank. She had learned, during those months of transformation, that anticipation was just fear wearing a prettier mask. Better to approach each moment with the calm readiness that her tattoos had taught her to cultivate. The other recruits began arriving in clusters, their nervous energy crackling through the humid air like static electricity. Maya counted 23 bodies in total, all but 3 of them male, all of them carrying the kind of physical confidence that came from lives spent in gyms and on playing fields. She recognized some faces from the recruitment center. The whispers and sideways glances had already begun again. "Jesus, she actually showed up," one of them muttered, a thick-necked former football player whose name tag read Morrison. "Thought for sure she'd come to her senses." "Maybe she's lost," suggested another recruit, this one lean and wiry with the calloused hands of a rock climber.
"Administrative building is about half a mile that way, sweetheart." Maya didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge that she had heard them.
Gunny had taught her that words only had the power you chose to give them, and she had more important things to focus on than the insecurities of men who needed to diminish others to feel strong themselves. At exactly 0500 hours, the building's main door exploded open with the force of a breaching charge, and Gunnery Sergeant Rodriguez emerged like a force of nature made flesh. 6 feet of concentrated menace wrapped in digital camouflage, he moved with the predatory grace of someone who had spent 15 years turning theoretical warriors into actual ones. His voice, when he spoke, carried the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question or hesitation.
"Listen up, maggots."
The words cut through the morning air like artillery rounds.
"For the next 16 weeks, your sorry lives belong to me. You will eat when I tell you to eat.
You will sleep when I tell you to sleep.
You will breathe when I give you permission to breathe." The recruits snapped to attention with varying degrees of success, their civilian reflexes struggling to process the sudden immersion into military reality.
Maya found herself falling naturally into the parade rest position, her body remembering lessons learned from YouTube videos and detailed study of military bearing and deportment. Rodriguez's eyes swept across the assembled group, cataloging strengths and weaknesses with the efficiency of a combat veteran sizing up a battlefield. When his gaze fell on Maya, she felt the weight of immediate and intensive scrutiny. Well, Rodriguez said, his voice dropping to a conversational level that was somehow more intimidating than his previous shouting.
"What do we have here?" "Chen, Maya.
The little girl who thinks she can play with the big boys." "Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit believes she can serve alongside anyone willing to serve alongside her." "Gunnery Sergeant," Maya replied, her voice steady and clear. Rodriguez moved closer, invading her personal space with the practiced intimidation of a drill instructor.
"Is that so, sweetheart? You think your pretty little tattoos are going to help you when you're carrying a wounded teammate through a firefight? You think that ink is going to make you stronger when you're humping a 60-pound pack through 20 miles of desert?"
"Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit's tattoos are reminders of lessons learned, not decorations earned."
"Gunnery Sergeant," Maya responded without flinching. The answer clearly caught Rodriguez off guard.
He had expected defensiveness, maybe tears, possibly anger. What he got instead was a response that demonstrated both military bearing and philosophical depth. His eyes narrowed as he studied her more carefully.
"Lessons learned," he repeated. "What kind of lessons does a civilian learn that have any relevance to special operations training?"
Maya hesitated for just a moment, knowing that her next words would either earn grudging respect or make her a target for the next 4 months. "Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit learned that strength isn't about never falling down, it's about getting back up every time you do." "Gunnery Sergeant." Several of the other recruits shifted uncomfortably, sensing undercurrents they didn't fully understand. Rodriguez continued to stare at Maya, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his campaign cover.
"We'll see about that," he said finally. "Because I guarantee you, Chen, you're going to fall down more times in the next 16 weeks than you have in your entire civilian life. The question isn't whether you'll quit, the question is how long it takes you to realize you don't belong here." With that, Rodriguez stepped back and addressed the entire group. "Fall in. Double time to the obstacle course. First one there gets to eat breakfast sitting down. Last one there gets to explain to the rest of the class why they're wasting everyone's time." The run to the obstacle course covered nearly 2 miles of rolling terrain, designed to separate the genuinely fit from those who had simply looked good in a gym. Maya settled into a steady pace, neither pushing to the front nor falling behind, her breathing controlled and her stride efficient. Around her, the natural hierarchy began to emerge as the strongest runners pulled ahead and the weakest began to struggle.
Morrison, the former football player, had taken an early lead, his powerful stride eating up ground with impressive efficiency. But Maya could see the telltale signs of someone who had trained for explosive power rather than endurance. His breathing was already becoming labored, his form beginning to deteriorate as fatigue set in.
By the mile mark, the group had spread out considerably.
Maya found herself in the middle of the pack, running alongside Davis, one of the other female recruits. Davis was a former college track athlete, all lean muscle and competitive fire, but she was already showing signs of distress.
"How are you doing this?" Davis gasped during a slight uphill section. "You're not even breathing hard."
"Meditation," Maya replied simply.
"You can run a lot further when your mind isn't fighting your body."
It was a lesson she had learned during those dark months after her parents' death, when the only thing that kept her sane was hour-long runs through Golden Gate Park. Running had become a form of moving meditation, a way to quiet the voices in her head that insisted she was worthless, broken, beyond redemption. As they crested the final hill, the obstacle course spread out below them like a medieval torture device designed by military engineers. Rope climbs, wall traversals, crawling obstacles, and carrying challenges created a maze of physical and mental trials that would test every aspect of their preparation. Rodriguez was waiting for them at the starting line, his stopwatch ready and his expression promising pain for anyone who disappointed him.
"Listen up. You have 45 minutes to complete this course. Anyone who fails to finish gets to run it again after dinner. Anyone who quits gets to pack their bags." The course began with a 30-foot rope climb, the thick manila rope swaying in the morning breeze like a hangman's noose. Morrison, despite his earlier pace-setting run, attacked the obstacle with brute force, his powerful arms hauling him upward through sheer determination. But Maya could see the inefficiency in his technique, the way he was burning energy that he would need for later challenges. When her turn came, Maya approached the rope with deliberate calm. She had practiced this specific skill for months, learning the proper footlocks and body positions that turned rope climbing from a test of upper body strength into an exercise in technical efficiency. Her ascent was steady and controlled, her movements economical and precise. "Look at that," she heard Davis whisper to another recruit. "She's making it look easy." But Maya knew the truth was more complex than it appeared.
The rope climb wasn't easy, it was simply the result of months of preparation and the kind of mental discipline that she had learned to cultivate during her darkest days. Every movement was intentional, every breath controlled, every muscle fiber engaged with maximum efficiency. The second obstacle was a series of wall traversals that required recruits to move laterally across a 12-foot barrier using only their hands and upper body strength. This was where the natural athletes began to separate themselves from those who had relied primarily on running fitness. Maya watched Morrison struggle with the traverse, his powerful but inflexible frame working against him as he tried to force his way across the barrier. Her own approach was methodical and patient. She had studied videos of military obstacle courses for months, had practiced similar movements on the rock climbing walls at her local gym. The traverse became a puzzle to be solved rather than a mountain to be conquered, each hand placement calculated for maximum efficiency and minimum energy expenditure. By the halfway point of the course, the natural hierarchy had completely reshuffled. Morrison was falling behind, his early speed undermined by poor technique and inefficient energy management. Davis had dropped out entirely, overwhelmed by obstacles that favored upper body strength over cardiovascular fitness. Several of the smaller, more technical recruits had moved into contention, their preparation and strategy overcoming raw physical gifts. Maya found herself in the top third of the group, moving steadily through challenges that had been designed to reveal character as much as capability. The crawling section tested mental toughness as much as physical endurance, requiring recruits to low-crawl under barbed wire through sand and mud for nearly 100 yards. The carrying challenge demanded not just strength but the kind of determination that refused to acknowledge the possibility of failure. It was during the final obstacle, a rope bridge spanning a 30-foot gap, that Maya's preparation truly paid dividends. The bridge swayed violently with each step, designed to induce vertigo and test balance under stress. Several recruits had already fallen, forced to start the obstacle again while their time continued to tick away. Maya paused at the beginning of the bridge, closing her eyes for a moment and centering herself with techniques she had learned from an unlikely combination of military field manuals and Buddhist meditation practices. When she opened her eyes, her focus was laser-sharp, her breathing controlled, her mind clear of everything except the task at hand. Her crossing was a masterpiece of controlled motion. Each step was placed with deliberate precision, her hands maintaining contact with the guide ropes without gripping them desperately. She moved with the bridge's motion rather than fighting it, turning the obstacle's movement into an advantage rather than a liability. Rodriguez watched her progress with grudging respect, his stopwatch forgotten as he observed technique that belonged on an advanced special operations course rather than basic training. Maya's crossing wasn't just successful, it was textbook perfect, demonstrating the kind of mental discipline and physical preparation that separated operators from ordinary soldiers. When she reached the far side of the bridge, Maya didn't celebrate or even acknowledge the scattered applause from recruits who had already finished. She simply moved to the final challenge, a 200-yard sprint to the finish line that would test whatever energy reserves remained after 40 minutes of continuous physical and mental stress. The sprint revealed the true cost of the obstacle course. Recruits who had dominated earlier challenges found themselves running on empty, their bodies and minds exhausted by the cumulative stress of constant decision-making and physical exertion. Maya, however, had paced herself throughout the course, managing her energy with the strategic thinking of someone who understood that endurance was as much about efficiency as it was about raw conditioning. She crossed the finish line in 7th place overall, her time well within the passing standard and her form still controlled despite the intensity of the effort. More importantly, she had completed every obstacle on her first attempt, demonstrating the kind of preparation and mental toughness that Rodriguez had learned to recognize in successful operators. As the remaining recruits struggled through the course, Rodriguez approached Maya with an expression that mixed surprise with professional interest. "Not bad, Shen. Not bad at all." "Thank you, Gunnery Sergeant," Maya replied, her breathing already returning to normal despite the intensity of the effort.
"Where'd you learn to move like that?"
"That rope bridge technique was advanced level stuff."
Maya's answer was carefully considered.
"Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit studied obstacle course techniques as part of her preparation for this training, Gunnery Sergeant."
Rodriguez nodded slowly. "Studied how? YouTube videos and weekend warrior nonsense?"
"Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit studied field manuals, interviewed active and retired personnel, and practiced specific techniques for 8 months, Gunnery Sergeant." The admission hung in the air between them, carrying implications that went far beyond simple preparation. Rodriguez had seen thousands of recruits over the years, but he had never encountered someone who had approached special operations training with such systematic thoroughness.
8 months, he repeated. Most of these kids showed up thinking their high school athletics were going to carry them through. You spent 8 months studying how to be here.
Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit believes that failing to prepare is preparing to fail, Gunnery Sergeant.
Rodriguez almost smiled at that almost.
We'll see how much of that preparation holds up when the real pressure starts.
This was just the warm-up, Chen.
As the morning progressed, the intensity of training increased exponentially. Physical training gave way to tactical instruction, where recruits learned the fundamentals of small unit operations, weapons handling, and the kind of decision-making that separated special operations from conventional military service. It was during the weapons training that Maya's preparation truly began to set her apart. While other recruits struggled to field strip and reassemble their assigned rifles, she moved through the process with the fluid precision of someone who had spent countless hours studying military training videos and practicing with simulated weapons systems. "Holy shit," whispered Jenkins, a former Marine who had been struggling with the more technical aspects of the training.
"How'd you learn to do that so fast?"
"Practice," Maya replied simply, not wanting to reveal the extent of her preparation to recruits who were already viewing her with suspicion. But Rodriguez had noticed the fluidity of her movements, the way she handled the weapon systems with familiarity rather than nervous uncertainty. During a brief break, he pulled her aside for a private conversation that would change the trajectory of her training experience.
"Chen, where exactly did you practice weapons handling before arriving here?"
His voice carried the tone of someone who expected a complete and honest answer. Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit visited several shooting ranges that offered military-style training courses. Gunnery Sergeant, Maya replied carefully.
Which ranges?
Gunnery Sergeant, primarily the Redwood Tactical Training Center in Northern California, run by former Marine Gunnery Sergeant Michael Torres. Gunnery Sergeant.
Rodriguez's eyebrows rose significantly. Torres was a legend in certain military circles, a recipient of the Navy Cross who had transitioned into civilian instruction after a career that included multiple deployments with force reconnaissance units.
His training courses were notoriously difficult and expensive, attracting primarily law enforcement personnel and military contractors.
Torres doesn't take civilian students, Rodriguez said flatly.
Gunnery Sergeant Torres made an exception after this recruit presented him with documentation of her commitment to military service and her specific preparation goals. Gunnery Sergeant.
What kind of documentation?
Maya hesitated, knowing that her next words would either elevate her standing or make her a target for accusations of showing off. Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit presented a detailed training plan, physical fitness progression charts, and copies of all military manuals and publications studied during her preparation phase. Gunnery Sergeant. Rodriguez stared at her for a long moment, processing the implications of what she had just revealed. Torres was known for his intolerance of anything less than absolute commitment and professional preparation. For him to accept a civilian student, especially a young woman with no military background, meant that Maya had demonstrated something extraordinary.
How many hours of instruction?
Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit completed 140 hours of tactical training over a 6-month period. Gunnery Sergeant. The number was staggering. Most recruits arrived at special operations training with zero tactical experience beyond what they had absorbed from movies and video games.
Maya had completed the equivalent of a semester-long military science course before ever setting foot on a military installation.
Rodriguez nodded slowly, his respect for her preparation beginning to override his skepticism about her physical capabilities.
And Torres passed you through his program?
Gunnery Sergeant Torres stated that this recruit's tactical knowledge and weapons handling were equivalent to a Marine with 6 months of active duty experience. Gunnery Sergeant.
The admission sent shockwaves through the nearby recruits who had been eavesdropping on the conversation.
6 months of active duty experience was more tactical training than any of them possessed, more real-world application than most civilian athletes ever achieved. Morrison, who had been struggling with the technical aspects of weapons training despite his impressive physical capabilities, couldn't hide his disbelief.
That's impossible. There's no way some civilian shooting course is equivalent to actual military training.
Rodriguez turned his attention to Morrison with the cold efficiency of a sniper acquiring a target.
Private Morrison, are you questioning the professional assessment of a Marine gunnery sergeant with 22 years of active duty experience?
No, Gunnery Sergeant, but nothing, Private.
Gunnery Sergeant Torres has forgotten more about tactical operations than you'll learn in the next 5 years.
If he says Chen has equivalent experience to an active duty Marine, then that's exactly what she has.
The reprimand cut through Morrison's confidence like a knife, leaving him red-faced and stammering. More importantly, it sent a clear message to the other recruits that Maya's preparation was not to be dismissed or minimized.
As the day's training continued, the gap between Maya's performance and that of her fellow recruits became increasingly apparent. During combat medical training, she demonstrated knowledge of trauma care that went far beyond basic first aid. During navigation exercises, she moved through unfamiliar terrain with the confidence of someone who had spent months studying topographic maps and practicing with military-grade compass techniques.
But it was during the evening's culminating event, a night navigation course that combined physical endurance with technical skill, that Maya truly distinguished herself.
The course required recruits to navigate 5 miles of rough terrain in complete darkness, using only map and compass to find a series of checkpoints scattered throughout the training area. Most recruits approached the challenge with the same brute force mentality that had characterized their earlier efforts, moving quickly but inefficiently through terrain that punished careless navigation. Maya, however, had spent months studying military land navigation techniques, learning to read terrain features and use dead reckoning with the precision of a professional soldier.
Her progress through the course was methodical and accurate, each checkpoint located with minimal backtracking or wasted motion.
While other recruits wandered in circles or called for assistance, Maya moved through the darkness with growing confidence, her preparation finally paying dividends in a challenge that favored knowledge over raw athleticism. When she reached the final checkpoint, Rodriguez was waiting with his stopwatch and an expression of grudging admiration. Time, 4 hours, 17 minutes. That's the third fastest time in my 5 years of running this course. Thank you, Gunnery Sergeant, Maya replied, her breathing controlled despite the physical and mental demands of the challenge. Chen, I'm going to ask you one more time, where exactly did all this preparation come from? Because what you just demonstrated isn't the result of weekend warrior training or YouTube videos. Maya stood at attention, knowing that this moment would define her relationship with Rodriguez and, by extension, her entire training experience. Gunnery Sergeant, after this recruit decided to pursue military service, she approached preparation as if her life depended on it, because she knew that someday it might. Gunnery Sergeant. Explain. Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit studied every available military publication, interviewed dozens of active and retired personnel, and completed civilian training courses equivalent to basic infantry skills. This recruit believed that showing up unprepared would be an insult to the instructors and a disservice to her fellow recruits. Gunnery Sergeant. Rodriguez processed this response with the analytical mind of someone who had spent years evaluating human motivation under stress. Maya's answer demonstrated not just preparation but the kind of systematic approach to problem solving that characterized successful special operations personnel. Most recruits show up thinking their natural talent will carry them through, he said finally. You showed up having already completed half the curriculum. That's either the smartest approach I've ever seen or the most obsessive. Gunnery Sergeant, this recruit prefers to think of it as thorough. Gunnery Sergeant. Rodriguez almost smiled at that response. Almost. Thorough is one word for it. But preparation only gets you so far, Chen. The real test starts tomorrow when we begin the mental challenges. Physical training breaks your body down. Mental training breaks your spirit down. We'll see how much of your preparation survives when everything you think you know about yourself gets stripped away. As the recruits settled into their barracks for the first night of training, Maya found herself reflecting on the day's events. Her preparation had exceeded even her own expectations, but she knew that Rodriguez was right. The real challenges lay ahead. Physical training and technical skills were only the foundation. The true test would come when the instructors began the psychological pressure that separated those who could function under extreme stress from those who would break under the weight of their own limitations. She traced the lines of her tattoos in the darkness, feeling the raised edges of ink that reminded her of lessons learned and prices paid. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that her transformation was complete. But, for tonight, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction at having survived the first day with her dignity and determination intact. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. Maya had destroyed her weak self years ago in the aftermath of loss and failure. Now she was ready to discover what she could build from the ashes of that destruction. Part 3, The Unbreakable Truth. 3 weeks into training, the California sun had become a relentless adversary, baking the training grounds to temperatures that turned every physical challenge into an exercise in heat management and mental endurance. Maya had learned to find rhythm in the chaos of military training. Wake at 0430, physical training until 0630, chow until 0700, then 12 hours of instruction that blended physical challenges with psychological pressure designed to strip away every civilian comfort and assumption. The attrition had begun in earnest. Of the original 23 recruits, only 16 remained. Morrison had washed out during the second week, his impressive physical gifts undermined by an inability to function under the constant stress of instructor criticism and tactical complexity. Davis had followed 3 days later, overwhelmed by the cumulative weight of challenges that seemed to multiply exponentially with each passing day. Those who remained had formed the natural bonds of shared suffering, but Maya found herself in an unusual position within the group dynamic. Her consistent performance and obvious preparation had earned grudging respect from some recruits and barely concealed resentment from others. She was neither the strongest nor the fastest, but her combination of technical skill, mental toughness, and strategic thinking had made her a standout performer in nearly every training evolution. It was during the fourth week that Commander Cross made his first visit to observe the training progression.
Maya hadn't seen him since their initial interview, but his presence on the training grounds sent ripples of nervous energy through the recruit population.
Cross's reputation as someone who could identify future operators with supernatural accuracy had become legend among the training staff. Rodriguez approached Cross as the recruits prepared for the day's primary challenge, a complex scenario that combined tactical movement, weapons handling, and decision-making under extreme time pressure.
"Sir, there's something you need to see."
Cross nodded, his attention focused on the recruits as they checked their equipment and received their mission briefing.
"How's the attrition running?" 7 drops so far, which is about normal. "But we've got one who's rewriting the performance standards."
Rodriguez gestured toward Maya, who was methodically checking her weapon systems with the precision of a professional soldier.
"Chun. The one you interviewed. I remember her. How's she holding up?"
"Sir, she's not just holding up, she's dominating. Top performer in land navigation, weapons handling, tactical movement, and physical training. She's running scores that would be competitive in advanced operator courses." Cross studied Maya more carefully, noting the confident way she moved through her equipment checks and the obvious respect her fellow recruits showed for her technical competence.
"Any problems with integration?" "None, sir. If anything, she's become a stabilizing influence." The other recruits looked to her for guidance during complex evolutions. The day's scenario was designed to test every skill the recruits had developed over the previous month. They would infiltrate a mock enemy compound, gather intelligence, and exfiltrate while under time pressure and simulated enemy contact. Success required not just individual competence but the kind of team coordination that separated special operations units from conventional forces. Maya had been selected as team leader for her squad, a responsibility that carried both honor and tremendous pressure. Leadership positions during training were rotating assignments designed to test different aspects of character and competence, but selection for high-stakes scenarios indicated instructor confidence in a recruit's ability to perform under pressure. As her team prepared to move into the training area, Maya gathered them for a final briefing that demonstrated the depth of her tactical understanding. "Remember, this isn't about individual performance, it's about mission success.
Stay in your assigned positions, communicate constantly, and trust your training." The infiltration phase went smoothly, Maya's navigation and tactical movement skills guiding her team through complex terrain to their objective without detection by the observer controllers who were simulating enemy forces. But it was during the intelligence gathering phase that the scenario took an unexpected turn. Recruit Williams, a former college wrestler who had struggled with the technical aspects of training, triggered a simulated alarm while attempting to access a target building. Suddenly, the entire exercise shifted from a stealth mission to a running firefight, with observer controllers using blank ammunition and sound effects to simulate intense enemy contact.
"Contact left. Contact left."
Williams shouted, his voice cracking under the stress of simulated combat. Maya's response was immediate and professional, her tactical training taking over as she assessed the situation and began issuing orders.
"Henderson, lay down suppressing fire. Williams, bound back to the rally point. Johnson, prepare smoke for concealment."
What followed was a masterclass in small unit tactics that left the observer controllers scrambling to keep up with Maya's decision-making. She moved her team through a complex series of bounds and fire and movement techniques, using terrain and concealment with the skill of someone who had spent months studying advanced tactical doctrine.
Commander Cross watched the evolution with growing amazement, recognizing tactical concepts that weren't taught until advanced special operations courses.
Maya wasn't just following the basic procedures she had been taught, she was adapting and improvising with the intuitive understanding that characterized natural leaders.
"Where the hell did she learn to do that?"
Cross muttered to Rodriguez.
"Sir, I've been wondering the same thing for a month."
Her tactical knowledge is off the charts. The scenario culminated with Maya successfully extricating her team from the simulated ambush and completing the intelligence-gathering mission despite the unexpected complications. Her performance under pressure had been flawless, demonstrating the kind of composure and tactical thinking that took most operators years to develop. As the exercise concluded and the recruits gathered for after-action review, Cross approached Maya with questions that had been building since the beginning of her training cycle.
Chen, walk me through your decision-making process during the ambush sequence. Maya came to attention, but Cross gestured for her to relax into a more conversational posture.
Sir, when the alarm was triggered, my first priority was to assess whether we could still accomplish the mission or needed to abort and exfiltrate.
And your assessment?
Sir, the enemy response was localized and poorly coordinated. I determined that we could use fire and movement to break contact while still accomplishing the primary objective.
Cross nodded, impressed by the sophistication of her tactical analysis. That's graduate-level thinking, Chen. Where did you learn advanced fire and movement techniques?
Maya hesitated, knowing that her answer would either elevate her standing or raise questions about the extent of her civilian preparation. Sir, I studied Field Manual 3-21.8, Infantry Rifle Platoon and Squad, as well as several Special Operations training publications.
Which publications?
Sir, primarily FM 31-20, Special Forces Operational Techniques, and TC 18-01, Special Operations Forces Medical Handbook.
Cross's eyebrows shot up at the mention of the Special Operations Manuals.
Those publications were restricted documents, not available to civilian personnel through normal channels.
How exactly did you access restricted training materials?
Sir, through interviews with active and retired Special Operations personnel who were willing to share their knowledge with someone demonstrating serious commitment to military service. The answer was carefully constructed to avoid revealing specific sources while acknowledging the extraordinary scope of her preparation.
Cross realized that Maya had somehow assembled the equivalent of a special operations education before ever setting foot in a military training facility. Chen, what you just demonstrated out there, that wasn't basic infantry tactics. That was advanced special operations material. You executed movements that aren't taught until teams have been operational for months.
Sir, I believed that understanding advanced concepts would help me better execute basic skills. Cross studied her for a long moment, trying to reconcile the young woman standing before him with the tactical competence she had just demonstrated. Most operators develop that kind of battlefield intuition after years of experience.
You seem to have developed it through academic study. How is that possible? Maya's answer revealed the true depth of her transformation from broken civilian to potential elite operator.
Sir, when I decided to pursue military service, I approached it as if I was studying to become a surgeon or a lawyer. I read everything I could find, interviewed everyone willing to talk to me, and practiced every skill I could safely develop as a civilian.
For how long?
Sir, approximately 18 months of intensive preparation. Cross had interviewed thousands of potential operators during his career, but he had never encountered someone who had approached military service with such systematic academic preparation.
Maya had essentially completed a graduate-level course of study in special operations before ever beginning formal training.
The tattoos, Cross said suddenly, understanding flooding his expression.
They're not just decoration, they're a visual representation of your studies.
Maya nodded, rolling up her sleeve to reveal the intricate design that had first caught his attention during their interview. Sir, each symbol represents a unit studied, each quote represents a lesson learned. The tattoo is a permanent reminder of the commitment I made to understand what military service really means.
Cross examined the tattoo more closely, now recognizing the depth of research it represented.
Hidden within the larger design were symbols and quotes that spoke to an encyclopedic knowledge of military history, tactics, and philosophy. What he had initially taken for elaborate decoration was actually a visual dissertation on the nature of military service.
This level of preparation, Cross said slowly, it's unprecedented. But I have to ask why.
What drove you to invest 18 months of your life studying something you had never experienced?
Maya's answer was simple and profound.
Sir, because my parents died believing I would do something important with my life. I needed to make sure I was worthy of their sacrifice. The words hung in the air between them, carrying emotional weight that no amount of tactical competence could convey. Cross realized that Maya's extraordinary preparation wasn't driven by ambition or competitive spirit, it was driven by a sense of duty that transcended personal achievement.
Chen, I'm going to be direct with you. Your performance here has been exceptional, better than exceptional. You're demonstrating capabilities that suggest you could succeed in the most demanding special operations environments. Thank you, sir. But, I need you to understand something. The further you advance in this training, the more attention you're going to attract. There are people in the special operations community who don't believe women belong in elite units.
Your success will be seen as a challenge to their worldview.
Maya's smile was sharp as a blade.
Sir, with respect, I've spent my entire adult life being underestimated by people who thought they knew what I was capable of.
Their opinions don't change what I can accomplish.
Cross nodded, recognizing the same quiet confidence he had observed during their initial interview.
Fair enough.
But, you should know that I'm recommending you for advanced selection.
If you continue to perform at this level, you'll be fast-tracked to Special Operations Assessment. The recommendation was both an honor and a burden.
Advanced selection meant accelerated training, increased scrutiny, and the kind of pressure that had broken candidates with far more conventional preparation. But, it also meant the opportunity to prove herself at the highest levels of military service.
Sir, I'm ready for whatever challenges come next. That evening, as the recruits settled into their barracks routine, Maya found herself the subject of intense curiosity from her remaining classmates.
Her performance during the day's scenario had been impossible to ignore, and her conversation with Commander Cross had been observed by everyone on the training ground. Chen called out Jenkins, the former Marine who had struggled with technical skills but had proven himself through sheer determination.
What did the commander want to talk about?
Maya was carefully cleaning her weapon, her movements automatic after weeks of repetitive training. He was asking about my tactical decision-making during the ambush sequence.
That's not all he was asking about, observed Peterson, a former college athlete who had become one of Maya's closest allies during training.
He spent 10 minutes examining your tattoo.
What was that about?
Maya paused in her cleaning routine, considering how much to reveal about her background and preparation. She had kept the full extent of her civilian training to herself, not wanting to appear arrogant or create resentment among recruits who were struggling with basic concepts. My tattoos tell the story of why I'm here, she said finally.
They're reminders of lessons learned and commitments made.
Williams, whose mistake had triggered the day's scenario complications, looked up from his own equipment maintenance.
What kind of lessons? Maya set down her cleaning rod and considered her words carefully. The most important lesson is that strength isn't about never falling down, it's about getting back up every time you do.
That's just motivational poster bullshit, scoffed Martinez, one of the few recruits who had consistently resented Maya's performance. Real strength is about never falling down in the first place.
Maya's response was gentle but firm. Martinez, I used to think the same thing.
I spent years trying to be perfect, trying never to make mistakes or show weakness. But perfect is just another word for fragile. When the pressure got too intense, when life hit me harder than I was prepared for, I shattered completely. She rolled up her sleeve again, revealing the tattoo that had captured Commander Cross's attention.
This represents my rebuilding process.
Every symbol, every quote, every line of ink, it's all part of the person I chose to become after everything I thought I was got stripped away. The honesty in her voice cut through the barracks chatter, creating an intimacy that military training rarely allowed. Several recruits moved closer, drawn by the vulnerability of someone they had come to view as unbreakable.
What happened? Peterson asked quietly.
Maya took a deep breath, knowing that sharing her story would either deepen her bonds with her fellow recruits or mark her as damaged goods in their eyes. My parents were killed by a drunk driver when I was 18. I went from honor student with a full scholarship to drunk and disorderly in a jail cell in less than 2 years.
The admission sent shockwaves through the group.
None of them had suspected that their most successful classmate was carrying the weight of such profound loss.
How'd you get from jail to here?
Jenkins asked, his own respect for her achievements taking on new dimensions. I met someone who showed me the difference between being broken and being broken open, Maya replied. A Marine veteran who was dealing with her own demons. She taught me that the only way to become truly strong is to rebuild yourself from nothing, piece by piece, until you're stronger than you ever imagined possible.
Martinez, despite his earlier skepticism, found himself leaning forward with interest. "And that's when you got the tattoos?"
"That's when I got the first one," Maya corrected. "The full design took 14 months to complete, because each new section represented another lesson learned or another level of understanding achieved." Williams, who had been struggling with confidence issues throughout training, asked the question that was on everyone's mind.
"Do you really think that makes you stronger than the rest of us?" Maya's answer was immediate and sincere. "No. I think it makes me different.
You guys have natural talent, physical gifts, competitive experience that I'll never have. But I have something else. I have absolute certainty about who I am and what I'm capable of, because I've already tested both under the worst possible circumstances."
"And what did you discover?" Peterson asked. Maya's smile was sad and knowing and infinitely confident. "I discovered that I'm unbreakable.
Not because I never fall down, but because I've already proven I can get back up from anything life throws at me." The conversation continued late into the night, creating bonds between the recruits that went far deeper than shared suffering or mutual respect. Maya's willingness to share her story had transformed her from an intimidating overachiever into someone her classmates could understand and support. But, more than that, her example had given them a new framework for understanding strength and resilience. Physical capabilities could be developed, technical skills could be learned, but the kind of mental toughness that Maya represented could only be forged through genuine adversity and conscious choice. As the weeks of training continued, Maya's influence on her fellow recruits became increasingly apparent. She helped struggling classmates with technical skills, shared study materials she had developed during her civilian preparation, and provided emotional support during the inevitable moments of doubt and discouragement that characterized elite military training. But it was during the final week of training, when the remaining recruits faced their ultimate test, that Maya's transformation from broken civilian to elite operator reached its culmination. The final exercise was a 72-hour field problem that combined everything they had learned over the previous 4 months. Sleep deprivation, food restriction, complex tactical scenarios, and constant pressure from instructors who were determined to identify any remaining weaknesses in character or competence. Maya entered the final exercise with the quiet confidence of someone who had already faced the worst possible circumstances and emerged stronger. While her fellow recruits struggled with fatigue and stress, she moved through the challenges with the steady determination that had carried her through her darkest days and rebuilt her into someone capable of extraordinary achievement. On the final day, as the exhausted recruits prepared for their graduation ceremony, Commander Cross approached Maya one last time. "Chen, I've been in this business for over 20 years, and I've never seen anyone transform themselves as completely as you have."
"Thank you, sir.
But the transformation started long before I arrived here."
"I know. That's what makes it so remarkable."
Cross studied her for a moment, seeing not the broken young woman who had sat in his office months earlier, but the polished operator she had become through sheer force of will.
"I've got orders for you.
You're being assigned to Selection and Assessment Command. They want to see if your performance here was a fluke or if you're ready for the next level."
Maya nodded, unsurprised by the assignment. "When do I report?"
2 weeks.
"That's enough time for leave and preparation."
Cross paused, his expression becoming more serious. "Chen, what you've accomplished here has attracted attention at the highest levels of the special operations community.
There are people who want to see you succeed and people who want to see you fail. Either way, you're going to be under a microscope." "Sir, I've been under a microscope my entire life.
The difference is, now I know exactly what people will see when they look." Cross smiled at that, recognizing the unshakable confidence that had emerged from Maya's systematic rebuilding of herself.
"And what will they see?"
Maya's answer was simple and profound, carrying the weight of transformation that had been years in the making. "They'll see someone who destroyed her weak self and built something stronger from the ashes. They'll see someone who can never be broken by others because she's already been broken by life and chose to rebuild herself into something unbreakable." As the graduation ceremony concluded and the successful recruits prepared to move on to their next assignments, Maya found herself thinking about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From broken civilian to elite military operator, from weakness to strength, from victim of circumstance to master of her own destiny. The tattoo on her arm had become more than just ink and artistry, it had become a roadmap for transformation, a permanent reminder that the strongest people aren't those who never fall down, but those who get back up every single time. She had proven that the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, because destruction becomes the raw material for reconstruction. Maya Chen had been mocked by everyone who thought they understood her limitations. But her tattoo had left the SEAL commander speechless, because it told the story of a transformation that few people ever achieve and fewer still understand. The weak girl who had entered the jail cell 3 years earlier was gone forever, destroyed by choice and rebuilt by will into someone capable of extraordinary things. What remained was an operator ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that she had already survived the ultimate test, the test of rebuilding herself from nothing into something unbreakable. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. Maya had lived that truth, written it on her skin, and proven it through action. Now she was ready to discover what else she might become in a world that had finally learned not to underestimate the power of conscious transformation. The ultimate measure of strength is not how much weight you can lift, but how much weight you can carry while helping others bear their own burdens. True warriors are forged not in the absence of adversity, but in the conscious choice to transform adversity into wisdom, weakness into strength, and brokenness into unbreakable resolve. The story of Maya Chen serves as a testament to the transformative power of deliberate reconstruction, the idea that our greatest strengths often emerge not from our natural gifts, but from our conscious decision to rebuild ourselves into something stronger than we ever thought possible. Her tattoos became more than decoration, they became a manifesto written in ink, a permanent reminder that the most powerful weapon any warrior can possess is an unshakable knowledge of their own capabilities forged through the fire of genuine adversity.